what is the first of our virtual leadership series, but it is the continuation of the leadership series that we've been doing over the last few years, using the chat format as opposed to our guest this afternoon, and it's probably a little incorrect to call her a guest because she's been deeply involved in the British business group nationally and in Pune and Mumbai for many years. So our guest is Vandana Saxena Poria. You will have all have read her CV, which has been circulated, so I'm not going to say too much about that. But Vandana's professionally qualified as a chartered accountant. She's an entrepreneur, she's a trainer, she's a writer. She has been involved in promoting trade and investment in various corridors. She is a mentor, she's a speaker. She's also good fun. Vandana and I go back a long way. Started off with meeting through British Business Group matters, and then through the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, and also the UK India Business Council, on which we were both non-executive directors, and generally in the UK India corridor. So I will. I hope you're ready for a grilling now, Vandana.
Absolutely ready, Kalyan.
Okay. The first question, where did you actually grow up? Assuming you have grown up, of course.
No, it's still not grown up, but where I spent my early years, you can probably get from the accent, probably not too far away from you, Kalyan. I was in London, born and brought up in South London, and spent my first 25 years in the UK.
And what brought you into becoming a chartered accountant, into chartered accountancy?
So, like, when we were kids growing up in the UK, if you belonged to an Indian family, there were only three choices that you had. You could either be a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant. And I didn't want to be any of those. I actually did a lot of fun stuff. Like I set up a youth club when I was, I think, 14 or 15. I DJ'd on local radio. I wrote the arts and entertainments pages for a newspaper when I was at university. I wanted to do everything that was not related to any one of those three professions. And what happened was, after I did my degree, well, first of all, I didn't want to do a degree in accountancy. I wanted to do a degree in oceanic geography, but my dad just basically said, doctor, lawyer, accountant. I didn't have a choice. I went and studied accountancy. And then after my degree finished, I managed to persuade my dad, I still don't know how, but to give me a year off. And during that year off, I DJ'd on local radio and had absolutely no intention of going back into accountancy in any way, shape or form until the company that I was DJing for went bust. So lost money and it closed down, like literally overnight. And I was like, oh my God. And I went home and I talked to my dad, and my dad very seriously looked at me and he said, you know, Vandana, if you had been a chartered accountant, you could have saved that company. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. I thought accountancy was all about these debits and credits, right? What do you mean? So then he told me his interpretation of what it was to be a chartered accountant. And then I thought, that's it, I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to go and open my own radio station. So that's the long and short of how I got into chartered accountancy.
Where do you do your training?
I did my training at a medium-sized firm, first of all, called H.W. Fisher, which is like a top 25 firm in the UK, based in London. But right towards the end of my contract, literally as soon as I qualified, I got itchy feet and I decided, I look back at, don't ask me, I decided that I wanted to go off to explore the world, and I went off to Eastern Europe 6 months before my training contract ended. I got a job with Ernst & Young in Bucharest in Romania, and I moved over to Romania to finish the rest of my contract and then to work as a chartered accountant.
Okay. So you actually became a migrant or an expat or whatever we're currently calling them, before you'd actually qualified.
Yeah, absolutely. I was, before I qualified. I'd qualified in exams, but I hadn't qualified in experience.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so from a medium-sized firm like H.W. Fisher to one of the big guys, EY, was it a big change?
So, you know what? I remember going for an interview in London and then going for an interview in Romania. Romania was, back in 1995, 96, it was like the Wild West, right? And EY was a small firm at that time. It was much smaller than the firm that I had been working for. So I'd expected to go into these, plush offices with hundreds and thousands of staff. And it was like the partner and me, and then all these associates. And that was it, So it wasn't really going into the big four per se.
Yeah.
It was very entrepreneurial even back then. 97, 90, from 95 until 99, I was in Romania. And then in 99, at the beginning of 99, I was supposed to move to Russia, but the crisis had just happened in Russia. And so, like, literally overnight, it was like, right, you're going to Poland. So then I moved to Poland, like, literally overnight. And then I spent, like, the next 5 or 7 years, I spent in Poland, Hungary, Czech, Slovakia, Ukraine, Russia, Serbia, Bulgaria, and a few others.
And you're fluent in every language?
Vorbesc Românești, da. Now, can I remember? That was my Romanian. My Romanian's probably better than the rest, but I could at the time speak a bit of Hungarian, a bit of Russian, and because Russian, Serbian, Slovak are all the same, you could kind of speak those languages as well. But I've forgotten a lot of it. I think Romanian is the only one that's still vaguely fluent.
Okay. So an employee, then an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And then taken over by one of the big guys. So two big culture changes, I think.
Yeah.
On that.
So it was more than just two big culture changes, actually. And I think it kind of really set a solid foundation for what I do now, actually. Not only did I have to go through the culture change from a UK accountancy firm to a very young Big Four, and then going into opening my own business, and then going into this listed company, BPP. But I was more like an intrapreneur when I worked for BPP, as opposed to an entrepreneur, so inside the organization, because they didn't have a clue how to expand internationally. That was why they took me on, right? BPP, up until that stage, had literally no foreign presence at all. They were a very ethnocentric British company. And so, and this was pre-internet, this was pre-Facebook and Google and all of them. So it was kind of like, dare I say, the blind leading the blind. So I was opening up, and I ran it as a very entrepreneurial organization, made loads of mistakes, made loads of successes. So I was dealing with that, and also dealing with different countries as well. And you know what? Serbia may be small, and Hungary may be small, especially compared to India. And Slovakia may be small, and they may be literally 5 hours drive from each other. But those cultures are completely different. Hungarians are completely different to Slovaks. Slovaks are completely different to the Serbs. So just being able to juxtapose myself and switch between what they were like as well and what would work in those countries taught me a lot.
Yeah. You were saying about the different cultures and the different countries you've lived in, were there any commonalities, either business-wise or socially, or was every country unique?
You know what? Honestly, at the heart, we're all the same. And this is one thing I really believe, that we all look for belonging. We're all looking to trust people. We all want kind of, to have a good life, ultimately. But how we kind of view getting there is very different. And so the Hungarians are different to the Poles, and the Poles are different. I'm going to do some really horrible generalizations, right? But I just want to give you like a proverb that's used in Hungary. In Hungary, one of the proverbs they use is, if you've got two farmers and one farmer's cow dies, the other farmer will say, well, if your cow dies, I'm going to damn well make sure if my cow dies, I'm going to damn well make sure your cow dies too, right? So and I found at the time Hungarians fairly negative, right? And most people who have lived in Hungary will say that. I remember going to an event at the British Chamber of Commerce in Hungary, and our deputy ambassador was there, who is now, by the way, I think he's he's consul general in Australia. But so we were talking to somebody, we were talking to somebody who was there, and we were saying, how's life? And she answered, it's good. I got promoted. And you kind of go, if you've got promoted, surely you should be happy and going, yeah, I got promoted. And Michael just turned around and said, you're quite negative, aren't you? And she goes, yes, I guess so. I mean, will I be able to do this bigger role or not? And he said, well, of course you're negative. You're Hungarian, which is just like, I can't believe you said that. But, so that's Hungary. On the other side, you've got Romania. And Romanians are like really like joyful, loving people, very strong, very, I got promoted. Come, let's go for a drink. So they were very, very different, right? And the Poles were kind of like a little bit stiff. I mean, things have changed a lot now, Kalyan. I'm talking about 15 years ago. Like if I talk about, what England was like back in the 70s, you remember that. I mean, it wasn't necessarily an easy or a pleasant pace. I remember being spat at and told to go back home. And although that happens now, it's much rarer. So yeah, I would say the cultures are very different, even though, and we have to think about this. Is Bombay the same as Pune? Is Pune the same as Delhi? We're very different as cities, and that's the same in Eastern Europe, I'd say.
So, as a woman in business in Eastern Europe,
yes,
15 years ago, 20
yes.
years, did you feel your gender had an impact on your work and your life and your opportunities?
What I would say is that I think I had a lot of things against me. It wasn't just gender. I had age against me. I became the managing director, the CEO of the international division of a listed company when I was 28. And people say to me now I look young. I'm 49 and I look young, right? Imagine what I was like at 28. I looked like a bloody school kid, and I'm short anyway. So I was challenged. I had ageism, I had sexism, I had racism, I had positionism. I had every ism you could think at thrown at me in different markets. I think the Swiss were the worst, honestly. I had a lot of challenges with Switzerland. I mean, I remember going in to see one of the partners to talk about training. He'd spoken to me on the phone, and I was an absolute expert in international financial reporting standards. We'd spoken on the phone. He was absolutely sold on what we were going to do. Then all of a sudden, I was asked to fly over to meet them. I walk in the room and he goes, "Where's your boss?" And I just looked at him and I said, "But I'm the one you were speaking to." And he goes, "No, you can't be." It was just so dismissive, in your face. So I have experienced everything. Trust me. Yes.
Yeah. And how have you coped with it? After you exited from Get Through Guides,
yeah,
it must have been that it was the first time in quite a while when you weren't in day-to-day charge of a business.
Oh yes,
How did that feel?
Oh my God, it was bliss.
What did you like about not having to do that?
Oh gosh, when you run an organization for a while, it gets quite bureaucratic, and it also gets quite administrative, and it can get quite political. And those are things that I don't enjoy, right? I loved my team. I absolutely loved my team. And it was heart-wrenching not to go to an office with a whole load of people that I really enjoyed working with. But I really did not miss the day-to-day running, the compliance. India is, God, compliance crazy, right? And I just hated all the form filling and the signing of documents for everything. That's not who I was, right? I'm much more of a kind of, although I'm a chartered accountant, I'm much more of a creative kind of entrepreneurial type person. So I was actually quite relieved to be out of it and to not have to do those things anymore.
But what do you miss about not running a business?
The politics, the administration, the compliance, the legislation, keeping up to date with all of that stuff.
No, that's what you don't miss. But what do you actually miss about?
Oh, what I miss is the contact with my staff, having a big team, being able to influence a culture, having day-to-day contact with students or professionals, working with clients on bigger projects. I miss those kinds of things.
And now you spend your time writing and coaching and speaking.
Yeah.
Where do you find the time to do all this?
So it's a couple of things. One is I've always been ruthless with my time, right? I've always been, my diary is like, if you could see it, it's color coded and everything I do is in there, right? Not that it runs me. I still very much run my diary, but I decided after I finished, exited Get Through Guides, that I wanted to spend 60% of my time doing voluntary stuff and only 40% of my time actually doing money-making stuff. So I mentor entrepreneurs. I mentor underprivileged women who are now studying at universities. I'm a trustee on a global leadership charity, etc. So I do, and still very active in the UK-India space. But I'm really careful about managing my time to make sure I'm doing the things that really makes my soul sing, and also adds to the other work that I do, which is the paid work, where I do a lot of leadership work. So I manage my time carefully, and I'd say that's it. I think, you've got to really think about, here's something I don't do. I don't watch the television at all. Like satellite television, don't watch it at all. I do watch Netflix, but I'll only watch one series at a time, right? And I read a lot. I'm really careful with what I put into my head, because I think too many of us have this cleanse my body, go to the gym, but pollute my mind, right? And just read every trash that's out there. I can't do that. So I'm on Twitter, and I'm active on Twitter, and I follow certain journalists and I'll read their stuff. I'm in some really good groups with people who share some really interesting stuff, insightful stuff, but I don't follow the norm, and I haven't for over 10 years. So that claws back, I'd say at least 2 hours a day, right? I don't do that kind of stuff.
Okay. And one of the things you do now is writing. And
yes.
You write in different genres, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell us about that a bit.
Okay. So for the last 10 years, I have been writing a series of very crazy, some would call it science fiction novels. I call it visionary fiction. Having lived in so many different countries and then moving to India and seeing a completely different way of life, I've sat there and I thought, why are people the way they are? Why do they follow certain rules? And the rules are so different, or principles, they're so different. If you go 100 miles, right, or kilometers, and different countries are so different, right? Why is that? And I started to get really interested in the human psyche. And the biggest thing that really impacted me when I came to India was how women were treated, because I saw how I was treated in meetings. It was unbelievable in the beginning. I'd walk into a meeting, and look, I was a bit big at that time because I just had number two, and she was like maybe 4 or 5 months old. And people would go, "Where are your kids? Who's looking after your children?" I'd just be like, "What business is that of yours?" But they would judge me on that, especially family-run businesses. And I would, talk to the street cleaners in Goregaon Park, and they would tell me how they were literally forced to have an abortion because, their husbands didn't have enough gold to give away as a dowry, right? And I'd hear these horrible stories. And I'd see in the workplace, I'd have people saying to me, "Oh, or saying to friends of mine, 'Oh, I'd really like to give you that job, but you know what? You're going to have babies soon. So no, if I have a man who's got the same as you, I would give it.'" They would openly say this stuff, Kalyan. So I started thinking about my life in Eastern Europe and my life in the UK, which was gender much more neutral, right? And I started to think, what would life be like if women had a greater say? And that morphed into, so that's a background to how this book came about. The book is about my protagonist, Ojas, who's a female teenager who suddenly finds out she's got into an institute, right? And the institute is not on Earth, it's in outer space. And the whole purpose of the institute is to find balance in the universe, right? And aliens from all these different planets come and study there, but they don't like Earth, right? So you kind of think, okay, why would they not like Earth? It must be climate change and all of this. No, she finds out that her mum is not actually from Earth. Her mum is from another planet. And her mum is from a planet where any baby that dies in the womb or within 11 minutes of being born, i.e. has been aborted, its soul goes to another planet and is born there. But because we're killing so many female babies in India, China, and South America, that planet is and always has been 80% female. And if you think that 80% of our history on Earth has been, and it's not a good or bad statement, but 80% of our history on Earth has been written by men and about men. 80% of religion has been written by men and about men. 80% of art, literature, science has been devised by men, right? If you had an 80% female world right from the beginning, what would it have looked like? So it's not to say that that would be true, but it was just, I wanted to explore another world, right? And I wanted to explore how different it could look. And so the book is about how she travels to her mum's planet. She travels to another planet, which is totally run by children. Think about what we do to children. We tell them, don't be like this, do this. If you don't do this, you won't be successful. We tell them all of this, right? We corrupt their poor little minds. What if we didn't do that? What if we just allowed them to grow? So that's another planet. And there's another planet where they can hear everything that you're thinking, but not what you're saying. So what would they interpret, right? So the idea is to take her on this exploration of these different planets and kind of see a different life. And it ties into the work that I do professionally with corporates now, which is I get them to change their mindsets. I get them to think differently by going to these other planets and saying, what would it look like if it was like this? Why do you accept this rule, right? Why does work have to? I was saying about work from home for years, right? Women, we can't have women in the workplace, but they can work from home. No, nobody can work from home effectively. Hello, COVID just proves that we can. So I just wanted to start turning the norms upside down. And that's what the Human Alarm Clock does, which is my organization now. The purpose of the Human Alarm Clock is to get people thinking differently and to disrupt their mindsets. So the book and the venture are very kind of interlinked.
But that's not the only thing you write, is it? You do write other things?
I do write a lot on mindset. And I do write a lot on how to change your thinking and on leadership and development and diversity. But for me, it's all wrapped into that area of mindset, right? Why are we programmed to be the way that we are? And so that's the stuff that I love writing, either non-fiction or fiction on.
and you also spend your time now in talking and discussing the future of work.
Yeah, yeah. And that fits into mindset as well. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that. How do you see the future of work, particularly in the times we're living through now?
I think it's a crazy time that we're living through. But, you know, quite honestly, all of us have been through difficulties. All of us individually in our lives have been through difficulties, right? I've been through a Me Too incident. I've been through a miscarriage. I've been through, you know, one of my businesses almost failing. I've been through a divorce. COVID is just, you know, I'm just like, bring it on, right? You know, so yes, it is different, but we know how to deal with different. We've been doing it ever since we were born. We just don't acknowledge it. But if we think about the future and the future of work, I would say for me, there's 4 things that I think are incredibly important. The first is agility, right? And they're all A's. The first is agility. We are going to have to learn, right? No matter who you are, you're going to have to learn to be less of a robot and much more agile with the way you think. And you're going to have to be much more entrepreneurial to be able to deal with even a corporate workplace now. And we're seeing that with meritocracy coming in. We're seeing that with profit with purpose, et cetera, all these things coming in. You need to be agile. You need to have an agile mindset, which means that you're constantly questioning and being curious. The second is agreeability that I think we are going to be in the era of mass co-creation and collaboration. I think we are going to see a lot of consolidation happening and a lot of vertical upstream and downstream integration, much more than before. If you talk to people in Silicon Valley, they do not look for a startup and say that's going to be the next unicorn. What they do is they take that startup and say, oh, you've got something really good. Can we now add 3 or 4 startups next to you and put you all together and make you the next unicorn? Amazon did not become a $1 trillion company, or $1 billion as it is now, company by just growing organically. They bought Whole Foods. That was part of their strategy. Facebook bought WhatsApp and Instagram, right? So if you look, there's a lot of vertical and horizontal and vertical kind of integration happening. And I think that that's going to happen more so. And I think smaller companies are going to do it much more, you know, especially in post-COVID times, because they won't be able to survive without it, right? If I'm a service provider, which other service providers do not directly compete with me, but might have an audience that my service could be applicable to, and vice versa? And I think we're going to see this big era of co-creation, and therefore you're going to need incredible agreeability, right? I think that's going to be very important. The third thing that I think is going to be important is acceptance, right? How many more webinars are we going to have talking about COVID and the implications of COVID? I mean, let's just get over it. It is going to be difficult. It is going to continue to be difficult. If I'm having a conversation with you, Kalyan, I don't want to talk about COVID. I want to talk about what we can do about it, not what the problem is. You know, it's like talking about the weather in the UK. You can't do anything about it. Just accept it and now move on, right? So acceptability of the times that we're living in. And the fourth skill that I think is incredibly important is articulation. I think we are going to need to be briefer. I think we're going to need to be much more sharper, wittier to keep people's attention for this period. I'm really sorry to do this, but I do this all the time. I watch on webinars how many people start the webinar and finish the webinar, because that to me is an indication of how good the conversation has been. Right? How many people join in the middle? You know, et cetera. We've got to start looking for different metrics. And all of that's going to be, can we articulate the right metrics to look at? So I think we're going to go into this era of closer collaboration. I think we're going to see a lot of hyper-localism coming in. I think supporting those in our immediate environment, as well as doing the global stuff. I think that's going to be there. And I think the working from home thing is here to stay. and I think we should get used to it. That's not to say that everyone is just going to work from home. I think offices are going to have to be redesigned, and they're going to have hub-like spaces where people will come in maybe for a day or 2 days, work together, and then go back, do their stuff, etc. I think that's the way the future is going to be. And I think the automation that's going on at the moment is going to help define a new era of the kinds of jobs. But if you don't have those 4 things, agility, agreeability, acceptance, and articulation, I don't think you're going to succeed anymore.
Can you talk about how you see India changing the role of women in society? Specifically, how do you see Indian business giving more leadership roles to women?
That's a brilliant question, and it's one that I really grapple with. I have seen things change dramatically just in the period that I've been here, 15 years. I'll tell you honestly what the challenge is. The challenge is not just the men, it's the women as well. We need to speak up more. We need to be out there more. And with our other commitments, it's very difficult to be that way, right? So we're going to have to make the time. I would just say be ruthless with your time and become members of organizations like the British Business Groups, you know, go and talk on platforms, be seen, right? I'm sick of seeing manuals, right? I don't call them panels anymore. They're manuals, right? Let's have a woman on every panel. That's what we need to do. But until women start speaking, it's going to be difficult. And the other thing is we need male allies, and we need more male allies. I think Kalyan is a great one for women. He's been so supportive all through my career. He's been, you know, hugely supportive. And I think we need more people like that stepping up and saying to women, how can I support you?
Thank you. I have another question. So you have talked about getting Indian companies to change. Do you think that the pace of change in India is increasing?
I would say in the multinational companies and the outsourcing companies, incredibly. In the family-run businesses, where the next generation is coming in, yes, it is changing dramatically. A lot of that next generation of family-owned businesses, they've gone abroad, they've studied abroad, and they've come back and they've got these new ideas, and their parents are loosening the reins. And I've seen this, especially in Pune-based companies. I've seen this in Kalyani's, in Bharat Forge. I've seen this in the Kirloskar Group. I've seen this with Cyrus Poonawalla and the Serum Institute, right? So I do see it changing and faster. But if we want to see it changing faster, then more people need to speak up and more people's views need to be accepted.
Thank you. And the last question I have is, lots of people talk about management, but few seem to see the difference between management and the leadership. What is your view?
Yeah, I completely agree. Managing is organizing, it's compartmentalizing and re-resourcing. Leadership is coaching, right? It's supporting from the bottom upwards. And, you know, the one thing that I'd say, you know, Kalyan and I are both, we've been in privileged positions where we've been with Ratan Tata, with Anand Mahindra, with Narayana Murthy. They're all so humble. They all listen to whatever you're saying. And they really try and take the most out of it. What we need to do is we need to get our managers to stop being so defensive and thinking that they need to lead in this way, because they're not leading, they're organizing. And we need to get them thinking much more like coaches to take India forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kalyan, I'll be quick because I see the counter at the bottom hand corner of the screen spiraling downwards. So before it goes any further, a few heartfelt thanks. Firstly to Saloni, as ever, for having put this event together. I think all of us owe Saloni a great deal of thanks, because no matter what the circumstances, she organises things with great efficiency, and we are very much indebted to her. So thanks for that. Before they all disappear, thanks very much to the audience for attending this evening. It's great to see everybody. Well, not see, but to know that they're there anyway. Thank you all very much indeed for supporting this event. It is very much appreciated. As I have said before, and I will keep saying, the BBG is all about its membership and the events that we try and organise for people. I hope this has been fun, so thank you all very much indeed.